Cool. That'll be the first thing on the transcript is we're a well-oiled machine today. uh, Thanks everybody for joining us. This is Cloudy County. This is our land grant themed community where we try to teach you all kinds of cool stuff to hopefully make your life easier. Understanding that there's lots of options, lots of tools out there, but we want to show you things that the objective is to make something better or save you time or make something easier, those types of things. Um, we have a special guest speaker today that Joe, so I'm so thankful for Joe because I have been around a lot lately. So
You've been
I feel
traveling a bit, I think. So
I have, yeah. I feel guilty because I mean I don't know if we have anybody from Ohio on the call right now, but I'll be spending some time in that area, so maybe I can swing by some sort of piece of Ohio. I did see greenhouses and farms and all kinds of stuff in Ohio that were a part of the land grant program there, which was pretty cool. Um, Played disc golf around that area, so that was
the
cool. Joe
best
knows that
that's the best way to find yourself out there in the out in the land. So
it's the best way to get thorns and walk through trees, which is what I did because my shots were not that great. Keep it on the fairway. Anyway, um, thank you, Joe, for working out a guest speaker for us. And this is a really cool topic, visualizing data, which is, I'm sure there's no need for reporting and those types of things in extension, right? You don't have to do that at the end of the last 2 months of the year every year, trying to understand impact and data and the things that you've done. So hopefully we can learn a few tricks on how to visualize that stuff today with Nico. So Joe, I'm gonna
yeah,
hand it
yeah.
off to you and I'm gonna shut up now.
Yeah, no, this is great. I'm excited to have Nico Moro with us from the University of Florida IFAS College of Liberal Arts and Sciences Dean's Office. And Nico's role as a
Sorry,
data
sorry, agricultural and life science.
agricultural life sciences. Yeah,
You had
sorry.
the right
Kyle's
letters, the wrong
You
order.
had the right
Yeah, yeah,
letters,
yeah,
wrong
yeah.
order.
Kyle's class, we have both here. So, and data management analyst is his role, and just been seeing some really great work out of that office, out of what he's been producing with respect to reporting and dashboards. And I think it's a great opportunity to see how to take an Excel file. Um, Actually, going to take I think a couple Excel files, sort of link them together, and slowly build out a story, build out a dashboard, a way to report that looks way better than sending somebody a spreadsheet. And with that, we're going to hand it over to Nico. He's going to take us through step by step, just getting started with an Excel file and how to bring that into Microsoft Power BI. So really appreciate having you here. Feel free to get started.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks, Dwayne. I'm really excited to get to talk about this with you all today. Appreciate the time. Yeah, I think this has been a space, especially in the last year or so, that's been exciting to work in, especially with some of the new software and technology and different things that are coming out. But Joe kind of started the conversation a little bit with the way that I start with dashboards and with data analytics as a whole is what's the story that we're trying to tell. A lot of you working in extension in different counties, there's different stories that need to be told, whether it's 4-H or whether it's stakeholders that you're working with, different organizations. How can we better tell the story through data, through visualizations, through a dashboard? And so that's what I get to do each day. And so I'm going to walk us through the ground up as we look into Power BI. Some of you may be familiar with that. Some of you may not be. So hoping we can get a broad overview from the floor up. Before we get started, I have 3 rules. If you want to write these down, you can. If not, I can send them out later, or I'm sure we have AI transcript going on as well. But the first rule, again, is tell the story. We want to be telling the story of our units, our departments, our centers, how we can make better informed decisions. And I think that's the key point. We want to be ensuring that we're building tools that are going to be used to make decisions. It's one thing to make something look pretty. It's another thing to make a decision based off of that thing. And so, like we've talked about, telling the story is rule number one. Rule number two, we're keeping the end user in mind, especially thinking about, the space that you all are working in each day. There's such a variety of different stakeholders, whether it's IFAS administration, or whether it's a student or a family, or an ag extension teacher. There's different stakeholders, and so as we are presenting data, we want to make sure that it's understandable, that we're using terms that people understand, numbers that people will recognize, and rates that people understand. And if they aren't familiar, that we are describing it in such a way as to make it easier for them to understand. And then the third is, and this one is my favorite, that dashboards are not spreadsheets. And so as we are thinking about dashboards, many programs will have the ability to bring in a table or a matrix. And I think there are time and places that we can use those on a dashboard, but for the most part, dashboards are not spreadsheets. If you think about driving in your car and you look on your dashboard, there is no spreadsheet there. And so be thinking about that as we are building these. So without further ado, I'm going to share screens here, and we will get rolling. All right. And so as we're looking at this, I've opened up Power BI. This is the frame that you're going to see when you open up the program. And for those of you who may not be familiar with it, there was Excel, and they said, let's take some of the things that Excel is doing and make them easier and a little bit easier to visualize some of the things that we're doing. And so the framework, if you have worked in Excel extensively, is very similar. You'll see a lot of the bookmarks up here, a lot of the different areas and columns, and even and we'll get into this, but some of the calculations that you can do. A lot of the formulas are very similar to Excel, which is a huge thing as we're thinking about end users. What are the ways that we can be providing them things that are understandable? And that being said, at the end of this, we're actually going to be deploying into teams. And so if you work in teams regularly and have a team of people or something, that's where you house a lot of the contact and communication, we're going to house this dashboard in the end in Teams. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click import data from Excel. There's different options, but for today, we're going to be using an Excel sheet and getting static data. And we're going to go ahead and click the file that we want. We're going to be looking at some computer data and some information from that. So this is our file. It's going to ask a couple different options here of when we're looking at the file, what table do we want to bring in? So I have different sheets. But really what I want is this computer table. You see a little bit of a preview, and so you can see some of the information that's coming in, different operating systems that we're using, different models, different CPUs, and the different values that come with that. And so we're going to go ahead and load this data. And there we go. It is in Power BI, ready to be used. And as we're thinking about this, some of you may work in the IT space, some of you may work on computers, so you may not touch computers. But as we're thinking about this, understanding that this is a frame of mind that we're trying to work towards, or at least, I'm hoping that you can walk away and get an idea of how to build these things rather than how to create a dashboard for IT information. How can you create a dashboard for your own specific areas? And so I'm going to be using these different attributes, but be thinking about how, what are the things that you can be using data for in your own space. Again, you may not be touching a computer on the day-to-day, and so how can we be building our own tools for individuals? So I imported our information, and we have all those attributes available. But what I'm going to do is just rename this computer data. I think naming is important, and so it's easier to follow along for us. Especially, you can add in, dozens of tables, and so having a naming schema that's easy for you to understand is helpful. So that's the first step. But understanding that there's different ways to visualize our data. And so there's some different tools here. If we look, there's bar charts and line charts and crosstabs and different things that we can add in. But I think the first thing to do is actually look at the data that we've just imported. There's a saying that goes around in some of the data community or machine learning that garbage in is garbage out. And so we want to make sure that we don't have garbage going in. And for the most part, I've cleaned this on the front end, but looking at, this sheet and asking, what are the things that are on here that are helpful for me? And is there any other things that I want to be using? Is there anything that I can clean? Is there anything that I can add into this space? And the first one that I'm looking at is these primary users. If we're looking at this, these are some Gator links that we have, or pseudo Gator links that we've created. But we have this, Contoso with the dash. Let's clean that up a little bit. And so we're actually going to add in a new column. If we have that here, and I've wrote this beforehand, but we're going to create a username value. Again, if you've worked in Excel, this may look similar to Excel with some of the formulas, but all this is doing is searching for that slash that was in there, and then pulling all of the text that's after. So once we commit to this, we'll see that this populates, and we have a new column, and I think that looks a little bit easier to understand. As we continue to move forward, let's keep looking at the information, and we'll see these department codes that we're looking at. We want to understand that, this is AEC or animal sciences. Let's go ahead and pull that out. Instead of the computer name, let's go ahead and get that department information. So we'll create another column and add in our department code. And again, this is similar to the other one, except it's looking for these hyphens instead of the slashes. And you'll see now we have the departments that we've pulled out. So that'll be something that's easier for us to, that'll be easier for us to look at later and kind of move through. And then the third one, as we're looking at this, is the inventory time. So we've looked at when this last inventory date is. If we want to know how many days it's been since that last inventory date, let's go ahead and create a value for that. So we'll do a new column, create an inventory time. All this is doing is subtracting the date here from the date today. And we'll see that for this computer, it's been 57 days since it's last been inventoried. So as we move ahead, we've added in some columns. We've added some things to make it a little bit easier. A lot of this you can do on the front end. I tried to do as much cleaning as I can. If there's columns or things I want to add in, I try to do as much of that as I can before I get into Power BI, but there may be things along the way that you want to go ahead and add in. So we'll go back to our report view, and this is where we're actually going to begin to start building the report. As I mentioned, we can look on the side and see these attributes, and one of the really helpful things is you're able to just drag and drop these values over. And so if I take username and I drag it over here, we're going to see a list of all of the different usernames associated on our sheet. But as I mentioned, dashboards are not spreadsheets, so let's go ahead and make this a number. Right now it's going to automate to a table, but let's go ahead and grab this card value. And it's going to grab the first username of that list. That's one individual, but let's go ahead and try to get the count of all of the individuals that we're working with. So we can click on this caret down here, click on count. And now we're counting the number of users that we are working with, the number of computer usernames that we have within our sheet. And so that's helpful. We're beginning to tell a story. But let's go ahead and grab another value. So if you look there, I just copy pasted this value. So we copy pasted, and I'm going to copy this card and create another card now. But we don't care about the username. What we want is the computer name. And again, we're seeing first computer name, but let's actually get the count. And so as we look at this, we're seeing this is the number of users and the number of computers that we have. But as you think about this, as you think about the story we're telling, is that really the case? If we were to go ahead and look at this, in reality, there may be more computers than users. If I think about myself, I work on a desktop and a laptop. So ensuring that the counts we hear are actually telling the correct story. So if we go ahead and grab this count, let's go ahead and grab a distinct count. And this looks a little bit differently now. So we have 2,811 distinct users rather than that 5,314. And so, for every user, maybe there's around 2 computers, or we have a computer somewhere that's running a server or running a database in the background that maybe isn't associated with user. And again, we're beginning to tell the story that we're thinking about. But as we're looking at this count of username, it's a little bit hard to understand as we're thinking about the end users that we're going to be providing these tools with. So if you double click on count of username, you can actually change that. And let's change it to users. And then this, we will go ahead and change to computers. And I did that again by double clicking on this field and changing that the way I want to. And as we're looking at this, okay, what's the users, what's the computers? We go back to our data and we say, what's the story again that we're trying to tell? And we created this inventory time. And so maybe we are working in a department and trying to understand, what's the last time that our computers have been inventoried. So let's go ahead and bring that in. Let's do inventory time. And now it's automating to a bar chart. But again, let's go ahead and make this a card. And it's going to sum all of the days, but that's not really helpful to us right now. And so what we're going to do is a quick value, and we're going to actually select the average. And so if we look at this, we'll see that almost 68 days is the average amount of inventory time. Now, if you worked in IT, maybe that's something that is good. Maybe that's what we're looking for. Maybe you're on a 90-day inventory cycle. Maybe you're on a 30-day inventory cycle. What story are we telling with this? How can we use this to make decisions? And so that's going to be the average inventory time. Let's go ahead and change the name of this. And so if I left this just as inventory time now, it'd be hard to know what that actually represents. It's easier to understand that this is users and this is computers. And so if you think about, again, end users, let's just go ahead and add in, it says average days. And so now we're looking at inventory time, users, computers, and the average days of those computer usage. Continuing to move on, we'll talk about something called quick measures or new measures. And so when we opened up our data over here, we created new columns. And those columns are using these calculations for each row. But what if we wanted to create measures for all of the data? So we're going to go ahead and go to our calculations, add a new measure. And if I grabbed this other calculation, what I'm doing is, let me run this and I'll actually show you the data so it's easier to understand. If we looked at disk space and we looked at free space, let's say we're wanting to understand how much space are we using on the computers that we have. Are we running out of space? Are we using too little space? Are we buying computers with higher space available? And so that's what this calculation that I just did. So I'll pull it back up. It's looking at the total space used. So I summed the disk space and I summed the free space and I subtracted them to create a percentage rate. And so if I pull that measure in now, it's going to do a bar chart. We'll do a card again. And so this is a percentage, but right now it doesn't look like a percentage. And so let's go ahead and click on this. And when I go to the format tools, I can actually change it to a percentage here. And so we're looking at almost 45%. So if we're looking at this, what's the story that we're telling? We are using almost 45% of the space available on our computers that's holding information currently. And if we look at this measure again, so I click on the attribute over here, look up top here. This number is a little bit long, and so let's go ahead and remove some of those decimal places. And that gives us to 45, a little bit rounder, a little bit easier to look at on a screen. And 0.75 of a day is hard to understand as well. And so let's just go ahead and see if we can change that to a whole number. leave it at general. And so that's 68 days instead of having those decimal values there. But as we're looking at these, if I'm hovering over them, they're all different sizes. And so let's go ahead and change these and make them, before I do that, we'll do this. As we're looking at this, this white background is a little bit bare. And so one of the cool things that we can do is actually add in background images to the spaces that we're working in. So if I come over here and I go to Canvas background, I can actually browse for images. And I will go to visuals and add in this IFAS background. As we've looked, it's hard to see the IFAS logo that I've included. And so we'll fit this. And we'll see UF IFAS, University of Florida. And this is starting to look a little bit nicer. As you can see here too, if we go to our background again, I can change the transparency. And so sometimes I'll use multiple backgrounds and, change the transparency depending on that. But we want to be able to see this right now. And so we'll leave it at 0%. Now back to what I was starting on. So if we're looking at these, they're all different sizes. And we want them to look a little bit more uniform. And so what I could do is go and subtract and make them bigger or smaller. And it helps out, similar to PowerPoint, where it maybe lines up with the middle of the screen. But let's go ahead and just change these values ourselves. So if we go to our visualizations, there's actually an area where you can format them. So format your visualization as a little paintbrush. Go to general and then properties, and we can actually see the size of these cards that we have. Let's go ahead and change the height there and change the width here. Now I've cheated and come up with these values before. Sometimes it takes some time to figure out the ones that work. But let's go ahead and change that for all of our values. Something's not right. What did I do wrong? There we go. All right, so it's coming together. We're thinking about the end user. We're beginning to tell a story. Let's go ahead and change this just to average. And putting this together. As we're looking at this, we keep asking ourselves, what are some additional things that I can add in here to tell a story? What are some other things that I can be looking at? So we've used some cards to show some, shock values. Maybe they're KPIs or key performance indicators, things that are important to the department that we're working in. But maybe we want to visualize some more information. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab a donut chart and bring that in. These are very similar to pie charts. I think they're a little bit, in terms of visualization, easier to read. And I think they're a little bit better to compare the sizes of the areas than pie charts. But everyone has maybe their thoughts on which one to use. But let's go ahead and use the donut chart. And we'll actually change this size here to about this. And what we're wanting to look at now is, okay, maybe we're trying to get a sense of, again, thinking about the story, what are the types of computers that we have in the space that we're using? So if we look at our data again, these are the different models that we have. We have an Optiplex 7000, Optiplex 3000. Let's go ahead and get the count of those models. And so we're going to add in models to our values. So we see that 5,300 aligns with the computers that we have. But this doesn't really tell us much right now. So let's go ahead and add in a model to the legend, and we'll begin to see that break down a little bit more. Now we're looking at computers across all of IFAS on this data. And so there's a lot of different computers that we have. As you drill into your specific areas and units, that might decrease a little bit more. But let's go ahead and we will change this. Come over to our format visual, come over to our general and our title. Let's go ahead and change this to computer models. And again, I went over to our formats, our title, and we get some different options here too. So let's go ahead and change this to a horizontal alignment. And like I mentioned, you can copy paste things. And so maybe we're looking at the computer models, but maybe we actually want to look at the processor models. So let's go ahead and take this computer models, and we're actually going to delete these now and add in our CPU model. And we'll begin to see that change. Now you look, and as I copy pasted this, it kept the same title. So just make sure we go ahead and change that now to processor model. And again, as we think about it, what's the end user thinking about? What's the product that they're looking for? Is this easy? Is this understandable? Does this look like a spreadsheet as we're moving along? And the last thing for some of these visualizations is we've used a donut chart, but let's go ahead and add in a different one. So I'm going to grab this bar chart right here, or column chart as it calls it. Put that over here. And as we looked at this, maybe we want to understand what type of memory we're using. How many gigabytes does each of our computers have? And so what I did is beforehand, I went and created a calculation that we created a calculation that determines how many gigs it is. So right now it's 16,000. There's 1,000 megabytes in every gigabyte, and so we just divided by 1,000, and now we have 16 gigs. And so as I mentioned, thinking about the data. But before we bring into Power BI, are there ways that we can be doing calculations to make what we have easier to understand rather than doing it in the actual program? So let's go ahead and grab that memory. What's going on here? There we go. So we're looking at the sum of memory across this memory, but I'm sure many of you are looking at this and going, what is this even telling me? And so what we can actually do is, right now we have counts of this memory, but what we actually want to be looking at is from a more categorical understanding. And sometimes the data, when we pull it in, doesn't look the way that we want it to. And so we'll go ahead and change that over to categorical data. The way we'll do that is we'll come over here to our format, our x-axis, and then we will change this from continuous to categorical. And then now we can see, for computers that have 16 gigabytes, that's the sum. And again, this doesn't really look like, right? How do we have 40,000 computers with 16 gigabytes? Again, it's because we're using the sum, not the count. So make sure we're telling the story that we want to be telling. And that looks a little bit better. And again, as we're thinking about what does this tell us? It tells us that 16 gigs is the most average amount of memory that we're using on these computers. Many of you may be working in IFAS, or maybe you have different areas. Maybe it's 4-H, maybe you have your own branding schemes. So one of the things that we can do is actually create and bring in a template for our themes, the colors that we're using. We want it to match up across the board. And so Power BI provides some themes that you can go ahead and change different colors if you wanted to. We'll go ahead and bring this back. But also you can create your own themes that you can use time and time again. So let's go ahead and browse for themes here. And all I did is I wrote some JSON code. And if we look at it, now we're using these specific colors across all of the different ones. These are some ones that we have from IFAS branding that help us get a little bit understanding and a little bit easier to understand within the space that we're in. Also, you'll see that it changed some of the fonts that we've used. And so there's different ways of doing that. But we've changed the fonts. And we'll see as we brought this in, it actually kind of messed up a little bit of what we were looking for. And so let's just go ahead and change that back to 0 over here. Actually, we'll go ahead and change the value. So we'll come to our format, our value, and then change the decimal places to 0. So 68. Great. As we're looking at this and understanding how can we make this look a little bit better, let's go ahead and we can actually drag and move these around. But as we're looking at these, maybe I've moved them and they don't look too equidistant apart. One of the things that's really cool is being able to drag over this whole thing, format, and then we can actually align them and distribute horizontally. And once I click this, you'll see that they align themselves evenly across. But again, as we're trying to understand, how do we make this more user-friendly? How can we make users understand this a little bit more differently? And one of the ways is trying to adapt, what are users around most often? And if you think about your phones, think about, the rounded corners of apps. And so we can actually do that in here for these tabs. So we'll go ahead and click on this. We'll go to General, we'll go to Effects. We'll add a border on, and we'll change that border color to white. And you'll see here there's this ability to round corners. Let's go ahead and change that to 15. And now we'll see that it looks a little bit more smooth, sleek, whatever it might be that you're looking for. And we'll actually grab this, and similar to Excel or PowerPoint, you can actually format the painter. So click on the object you want, copy the format of it, and then paste it on another visualization. And we'll go ahead and we'll change this one here. Do it again, space. One more times. And now you'll see what I'm doing is opening for different visualizations. One of the things to be mindful is if you copy this format like I did, and I formatted this painter, it may change the way that our values look. So right here, this is a center aligned one. It's going to copy that center alignment and paste it on here. And so just be mindful as you're doing that. You may have to make some changes depending on other things that you've changed. But let's go ahead and just change that title, format, time. And there we go. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and change this title here. And so as we look at this, maybe we're not in this unit. Maybe we want to be looking at a different department. And we made that department code earlier. And so let's go ahead and add that in. And we're actually going to add that in as a slicer to be able to, we're going to add that in as a limiter or a filter. And let's go ahead and grab the Citrus Research and Education Center. And so what I did here is I grabbed this, and we're actually filtering the entire page based upon that one department. And so maybe there's a specific area that you want. You're actually able to filter on that for the entire page. As we're thinking about users, let's go ahead and add in a text box. And we'll add in CREC computer usage. Make this white. Make this look a little bit bigger. Take our background, make it 100% transparent, change this to white. Here we go. We're beginning to tell this story a little bit more. We talked about bringing in multiple sheets, and so we'll go ahead and grab another table. And so what we did is we've been looking at computer data, but maybe we want to add in some user data. What we can do is get more data. So we'll hit get data, click Excel workbook, and then we'll go ahead and open up this user information, grab the table that we are looking for. And so as we're previewing this, we have some information here. So I just added in an entire new table. Let's go ahead and change that to user data. And we're previewing it here. But right now, these tables are separate from one another. They don't interact. And if we looked at this visualization, we'd have interactions here. They can change. They can move around. But if I added in this data right now, there'd be no interaction between the two. So we need to think about how we can create a relationship, how we can marry the two tables together. And so we'll come over to our model view. And we'll see that we've created these tables over here. But they're not linked together, not interacting. And we want that, don't we? And so let's go ahead and take these relationships. We'll make a new one. And let's go ahead and grab our user data.
Hey, Nico, that might be the wrong table out of there.
Yep, it is the wrong one. You are. Thank you, Joe.
I think you got the right file, but there's
yep.
too many tables in there on you.
Yep. too many tables. Let's go ahead and do that again. Thank Joe. User information. Let's get the right one here. There we go. This looks right. There we go. And so let's go ahead and link these like we were doing before. A relationship, computer, table. And what we want to do is we want to find something that will link these two together. And so we know that there are users. So let's grab primary users. And then here we have our Gator links, our users. And we'll link these tables together now. And so we're using this user value as a way to allow these tables to talk to one another. In short, and we could spend a whole hour on this, but this cardinality, thinking about database design, as we talked about the story that we were telling, there can be multiple computers for each user. And that's why we have this cardinality of many to one. So there are many computers for every user. And we want to be able to actually talk in both directions. So we'll change this to both. And then we'll save. And now you'll see this relationship that's formed between the two tables. If we go open up our dashboard again, and we go ahead and add our primary department, we can add in our departments here. And again, no spreadsheets. So let's go ahead and add a slicer. What we could see is if we looked here within the Citrus Research and Education Center, there are actually different areas: entomology, horticulture. And if we use this slicer, we can actually select these and see this entire dashboard interact across the board. And let's go ahead and we'll change this. Right now it looks in rows, but let's go ahead and make this a drop down. So we'll go to slicer settings. We'll change the style to a drop down, bring this up, match the heights. We'll actually format painter and copy this style. And there we go. We can go ahead and click this. And we have our dashboard. Again, if we think about the rules, what's the story that we're telling? We can look at the users, we can look at the computers, we can look at the time of inventory. How are we making decisions based upon this? We're looking at the models and the processors within those. And so maybe we're needing to update our processors on our computers. How do we update those processes? And are we using the most up-to-date computers or the processors that we have, and do we need to go through and rethink the ones that we're using? And so we can tell a story, I think. As we move along, we're going to go ahead and publish this. I'm actually going to save this first, like I should have done in the beginning. Let's see. I'm going to call this Cloud County Dashboard. And so right now we're saving our Power BI desktop reports, but we want to be able to send this to users. And so we're going to publish it to the web version of Power BI. And so, I didn't get to this in the beginning, but there's two different instances of Power BI. You have the computer program, and then you have the online web interface where you can manage permissions and different things like that. And so let's go ahead and publish it to the online interface. And I've created some groups for myself, or working groups. And I'm going to put it in IFAS IT. Select that. And now we're publishing there. And we've published a Power BI. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll open up Power BI on the web. Now we'll bring this over here. And if we look, this is the home page for our Power BI web instance. And if we come over here on the workspaces, you'll see the same ones from before. And we'll go ahead and enter this IFAS IT workspace. See the different dashboards that I've now published here. And again, we can spend a whole hour on this as well. But when you publish your report, it's going to publish a report and a semantic model. The report is going to be the visuals that we just created. The semantic model is going to be a packaged data model that Power BI has created to make it a little bit more efficient to run those visuals interactions off of. Again, we can go into more depth about that, but that's in brief why it's published two different things named the same thing. So we'll go ahead and open up our Cloud County dashboard. And now we have our Citrus Research and Education Center computer usage dashboard, and it's on the web. But as we're thinking about this, what are the tools that we're using? A lot of people, I'm very familiar with Power BI and the web page, but other users within my office, within IFAS, within CALS, they may not be as familiar with Power BI, but a lot of us work in teams each day. And so being able to provide the product to them in teams is really helpful. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. If I open up Teams over here, we'll see I've created this CALS Analytics team with an IFAS IT channel. And if I go ahead and look at this top bar, we have some files up here, but also let's go ahead and add a new tab. And you'll see we have Power BI as an app. If you don't see it here, you may have to go ahead and see all and add another app, but with this get more apps. But let's go ahead and click this Power BI. And we're not going to post, but let's go ahead and create a new tab. And so now we've created a Power BI tab, but we need to bring in our Power BI. So maybe you had a link, but also I talked about those workspaces I created. I created that IFAS IT workspace. So we're going to go to Browse, see those workspaces again, and then add in our Cloud County dashboard. Once I add this, it's going to populate the dashboard here. And we'll be able to see the dashboard that we just created. And so again, thinking about the end user, what's going to be the easiest way for them to be able to access this? I think Teams is a really great option. If you're not in Teams, there's also ways to share links similar to how you might share a OneDrive file. You can go ahead and share your dashboards that way. But that being said, thinking about our rules one more time, we told the story, we thought about the end user, and I don't think this looks like a spreadsheet. So I think we answered those three rules, and we made a pretty cool dashboard today. So happy to answer any questions, happy to talk through any things, and I hope that you guys learned a couple things through this.
Thanks, Nico. That was great. I've got a couple of questions. The decision to clean your data, you can do that at the very beginning before you bring it in. But it looked like there was some powerful kind of data manipulation language that you had inside of Power BI too. Some of it looked like sort of Excel formulas, but some of those looked a little more powerful than that. So it's a little bit of decision there, I guess, just getting to know your data and how much massaging of that you need to do, kind of where to do it.
Yeah, it's a great question. As I mentioned, kind of the idea of garbage in is garbage out, and making sure that we're bringing the cleanest data that we can into the workspace that we have. And generally, as a rule of thumb for me, I try to do as much as I can beforehand. So you can do that in Excel. I also work and will write SQL scripts to pull out of databases, but doing as much as I can beforehand. That way, when I go ahead and pull it into Power BI, that's less work that I have to do there. Also, it's a little bit easier to make something repeatable. If I've created it in a script beforehand, it's going to be a little bit more repeatable if I do it beforehand rather than in each Power BI file that I have, especially if it's going to be a metric that I use multiple times. But thinking about Power BI and thinking about the DAX, so the DAX was those calculations that I used. That's a DAX as an acronym for data expression. But thinking about that, there's ways to learn that. Google's a great friend. Also, Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, that's powered by some of the AI models that we have available to us. They're also a great way to learn, to debug code. And I think, at least for some simple expressions, it does a really good job of, if you aren't familiar, if you haven't learned, it's a great way to teach you how to use some of those expressions.
Great, thanks. And those in the online service, the workspaces, those are kind of key to decide that first layer of access. Would you call it? You kind of compartmentalize some sharing that way. It looks like, of course, a way to bring like reports together, but is that another way to kind of decide who can have access to what?
Yeah, let me go ahead and pull up my workspaces. And so if we look at these again, yes, it's a great way to compartmentalize users in different areas. And so if you were to look at my workspace, I have some different areas that I work in within Cal. So our administrative team, some research I've done for the dean, advisors that I've worked with, a department that I've worked with, and so this IFAS IT. And so if I have these reports, I can go ahead and create permissions. So similar to you would with OneDrive, you can manage permissions and create and add people with direct access or just read only or be able to export information. But let's say, I had a team of users that I'm building dashboards for regularly. Maybe it's your leadership team in your department. Maybe every time you create a report, you don't want to be going ahead and adding in those same people every time. You can actually manage access to the workspace that you're working in, manage the access, and add people to that workspace, and then automatically it'll populate them for each of the reports that you're working with. And I think that's a really powerful way. It also makes sharing these a little bit easier, and where people aren't having to continually ask for permissions. Again, like a lot of the talks today, we could go into permissions and governance and how to share things best, for a long time and talk about that. But I think workspaces are a really great, helpful tool to be able to making sure that the people that need the information can have access to the information, that people that don't need the information don't have access to it. So.
Great, thanks. And we got a question on a little bit more around the when you brought that second spreadsheet in, and deciding on a one-to-many or many-to-many kind of relationship there. Kind of the reason why I think there was an option you chose both. And you kind of mentioned it was like a two-way street there a little bit or something like that. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Some of this gets into database design and how we build databases that have, we use two tables, but with some of the databases that I work in, it can be dozens of different ones, and we want to be able to tie these together. Just to kind of, I see a question too about the many-to-many relationship as well. If we think about at the simplest, orders and customers, let's say we're thinking about Home Depot. You may have a Home Depot account where you're the user and you're tied to account number 0078 or whatever it might be. And you go to shop and you have the option to buy multiple different drills, whether it's DeWalt or Milwaukee or different ones. There's only one of you, but there's multiple different users. And so that's where that one-to-many is coming from. But if we think about the drills, there's DeWalt, there's Milwaukee, so there's many different drills. And let's say I wanted to tie that to drill bits. There's different kinds of drill bits. There's Phillips, there's flathead, there's different ways. And so that's where that many-to-many relationship is going to come in. As certain entities will have relationships with other entities that'll have more products as well. And so that's, if you think about that will inform the decisions. You asked about the filtering both. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So if we wanted to create the dashboard and we, for one instance, only wanted to be able to filter in one direction, we can choose a single. But if we wanted them to talk to one another and filter on each other, then we'll use that both, and that way they can filter across. And there's different case. I've used both of those for different reasons. So it might depend on if you're thinking about an end user and you don't want them to get lost in all of the different filtering. Maybe we only want to be able to filter on departments and not filter on anything else. That might be a case where you did one-to-many or a one-way filter.
So that both option there was, you could have an object on the dashboard that was pulling from that second spreadsheet that you would filter on, and it would filter the original spreadsheet. That's kind of going back the other way.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's, I'll actually pull that up and we can kind of just show that quickly. So if we looked at, we have this primary department description is pulling from one spreadsheet, and I can change it to, let's say I click Lake Alfred. We'll see that respond there. But let's say I clicked on 11th gen core. We'll look now and we actually have a decrease. We don't see like Alfred there, or it's down there, but we don't see the same number of departments that are available. And so that's why it's filtering in different directions.
Okay. So you could, all those interactions in that screenshot or that dashboard there, you could almost, where you had CREC, could that have been sort of a selectable drop down that begins the top level filtering all the way down?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I filtered on CREC for the page, but if I wanted to make a slicer that filtered first on CREC or maybe it was entomology or Quincy, I could go ahead and select that and then see the different departments that would populate for that as well.
So no problem have basically multiple slicers on a dashboard is what you're, okay.
Yeah. I think, you can have multiple slicers, but I think, and this is a dashboard, my own dashboard philosophy, but the more things we start to add in, the more confusing it can get. And so I think, yes, add in more slicers because I do that, I'll have 4 or 5 depending on what I'm working on. But being sure that we're not adding too much in where now we're confusing the user and they're not actually sure what they're looking at anymore.
Great. I think that's, we're just about up on time. I think that covers some questions there we've been getting. I think you mentioned Google. You've got any key people that you maybe hit on YouTube or any names you can think of for training? Is there, I know we have access to LinkedIn Learning. Have you used that before? I'm just wondering where to help get started if this is kind of, put this in people's brains and I really want to go start doing some of this. Got any suggestions for us?
Yeah. I think, whenever I get started with something, I try to just dive into it head first myself. And so for a while, I just worked in Power BI, just kind of learning and learning where things are and on my own. And then eventually being able to look up different resources. So Google's a great help. Microsoft Forums. I mentioned Copilot. Copilot will help with some different things. But if you're thinking of different tools, how to visualize things, YouTube is a great option. There's a lot of great resources. I mean, even if you just looked up how to make my dashboards look pretty, you'll find things as well. And so I don't have a particular person that I go to often, but generally kind of looking for that.
Great. Thanks. Really, really appreciate it. I'm ready to go take some of this real data and go make some charts and graphs. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And I like how you repeated the point is we need to tell the story. We've got a whole hot mess of data points in a spreadsheet that on its own doesn't tell a story. It's just noise. So being able to take that and arrange it and, convey the point that you're trying to convey is pretty awesome. I saw some people in the chat talking about data points and telling the story of extension and what they're working on. And, if you've got data and data comes in all shapes and sizes, you can tell a story from it, and Power BI is a great way to do that. So thank you, Nico, for sharing that with the group. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to help.
All right, I'm gonna kill the recording, and if anybody's got any questions, let us know.